Alright, well we're back in session here for the 6th grade art class and we're getting ready to start setting up our project. Now I have attached to your Google Classroom materials a JPEG of this piece of artwork right here, which is what we were going to draw together in this case today, and this may be a shortened session simply because we're simply going to be setting up our project, and then we are going to move on to its actual execution. We're going to start doing the project then in the very next session. However, setting it up can take a time, and it can also be problematic for some people who may need to get materials together in order to do this. And so we've got to, if we're going to draw something like this, we're going to need some things. And the first thing that I think you're going to need for this project would be a ruler, okay? So you're going to need a ruler. You're also going to need to find a red colored pencil that we will be using to mark off our artwork with. You're going to need a green colored pencil so that you can color in certain portions of this to remind you when it comes time to draw them. It's much easier if you do it this way, okay? You're going to need, of course, need a drawing pencil, and I would recommend a pink eraser if you don't have a cap eraser. You are also going to need a piece of drawing paper or a poster board or some type of paper, and that paper will need to be 10 inches by 16 inches. And you'll see why that's important, but I will briefly explain. So you're going to need a 10 by 16 inch piece of paper. We are going to lay out 2-inch squares on that, and then these are 1-inch squares, so if we were to count them off by 2, it would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 inches. See, that's how wide it is, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 tall. So we're going to be making a drawing that is much larger than the small picture that I sent you in the JPEG. So you'll need all of those things. You'll also, furthermore, you need to find yourself either a compass. I like to use these safety compasses because they work really well and you can get a huge variety of circles out of them. Or if you're very industrious and you look around the house, you can find some patterns. In my physical classroom, we simply use lids off of cans. This large circle is just a lid from a can of peanuts, just kind of a short squatty can, and what you will need to know is that your pattern needs to be, let's measure it across the middle there. It looks like it's about 4 inches across. So the large pattern, the large circle, and we'll just say large circle, is going to be 4 inches in diameter. Okay, so we'll be needing to use that. And then of course you'll want to, as close as possible to this, let's see, we'll put it right here. You'd like make a dot in the middle of it and then very carefully just kind of cut a hole in it so you can see what you're going to be doing with it. We will be using that pattern very frequently. Same with this pattern. This is simply off of a lid of, I'm not even sure anymore what it came off of, but I have a whole collection of these types in my physical classroom. And so we're going to call that the small circle. Okay, and the small circle measures across, and I'm going to measure it on the other side. It measures across the middle, it looks like about 2 1/2 inches, okay? So its diameter is 2 1/2 inches. So I just found these patterns basically through trial and error, and I use them in my classroom simply because I know they're the right size for these projects. Or you can use a compass if you know how to use one, and I will be using a compass too. Okay, so those are the things we're going to need. You're going to need a large pattern, a smaller pattern, a compass if you know how to use one, a ruler of course because we're going to be measuring things in our drawing. You're going to need a green colored pencil, a red colored pencil, and a drawing pencil. And that should be enough to get through this project, okay? Until we get to the coloring portion of it, and then you will need an entire kit of colored pencils. So, the first thing we need to do with our grid drawing, which is what we're going to be making here, is kind of figure out a way. See, every time you look at a drawing, there are certain parts of it that are going to be problematic, even if you draw them exactly the way that they are shown. And so, in this particular case, we've edited this over the years to not necessarily have all of these stray details that are just very confusing to the viewers. And so I'm going to go through with my red colored pencil here, and I want you to X these things out. Now, I'm going to use a red pen in this instance simply because it shows up better on the projector. So there is this line down here that is underneath the car. That is really a shadow, and we have over the years chosen to take that out because it gets confused with this grid line right here all the time. So we just put an X there indicating that. On this front tire, the front tire, as you can see, because of the pressure of the car, it's sitting on the ground, it's got kind of a flat spot. If you draw it that way, everybody will just ask you about the flat tire. So don't let them do that. We're simply going to draw the tire as though it is round. So we'll just put that indication that it's round on there. If we look up here, this reflection on the tire has always been very problematic for most students. So we're just going to scribble through that and edit that out of there. It's hard enough just to draw a tire with a nice rim in it that is round, okay? So we're going to skip that part. Furthermore, there is a tire. You can see that this is the front tire, but there is a small indication of a rear tire back in there on the other side of the car. So we want to, I'm just going to put a mark there indicating that I don't want to draw that, okay? A little X right there would be, but we're not going to draw the other tire. Whatever this is back in here, and some people say it's the engine, other people say it's the transmission, whatever it is, it's kind of hard to figure out what it is, so I don't want to confuse people. We're going to scribble right through that, okay, and just remember not to draw it. Now, in fact, it may help you. Sometimes it helps if you just put like a little arrow at it or something so you know not to draw it. Alright, now we're going to move on here. On the back tire, we can see this tire closest to us, but there's another tire on the other side of the car. We're not going to draw that other tire on the other side of the car, so we're going to put an X through that with a red colored pencil. I'm using a pen because it shows up better. Furthermore, since we got rid of these like dragon teeth kind of reflection, we're going to do the same thing here. It's hard enough just to draw one big tire that looks good, okay? So we're going to get rid of that. And what happens is people get stuck on the details and never get the car really done. This one right here too, this reflection is going to go away. Although it does look pretty cool, I think it's a little bit complex for our particular skill level. Now furthermore, this car has got some logic problems. This rim looks three-dimensional, whereas this one doesn't look three-dimensional, which is kind of strange. So these little shapes like the moon, like a crescent moon in there, we're going to ignore those too, and we're just going to put a regular rim in there. Okay, so that ought to be enough to keep us busy. So you got to make sure that all of these areas have been edited, meaning we're not going to draw those, okay? Now, by the way, you should print this image from that JPEG if you can. If you can't, you should save it and in a file so that you can maybe split your screen. We have to reference this constantly when we're drawing. So if you split your screen and you have this image on one side and you're watching the instruction on the other side, then it will be very easy for you to follow along. But in this case, it would be best if you were to print this image, if you can possibly do that at all. Alright, now, we're going to move on here. So I'm going to put some letters and numbers. If you recall from our lecture on the grid drawing of the pear, we prepared it, that's funny, by lettering it across the top and numbering it down the left side. So in this case, we're going to letter this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Now A and 1 will be the same square, so we will put a 1 in there, and then a 2, and then a 3 here. We got to kind of stuff a 4 in there somehow, and this will be 5. Now, many years ago, people were asking when we started doing these types of drawings, it got really complicated to see where some of the details were at because there's so many black lines everywhere. So one of the solutions that one of the students came up with really was to identify some of those complicated areas by coloring them in so that they are easier to see when you were looking at all these black lines and stripes all over the place inside of the drawing. So that's how we came to the conclusion of using a green colored pencil for this. So there's a few things that are much easier to draw if they're visible, and one of them is this stripe right here. So I always have the students color this in green. Now I guess it could be colored in blue, but the green really stands out against some markings we're going to be making here in a minute. And although it shows that this is not connected, we're going to treat it like it's connected. So we're going to follow that stripe. So this has been a really good technique to help. It's much easier to draw the stripe if you can see it more clearly against all of the lines that are in the picture. So now also another problem area for people to see is this sway bar down here, part of this suspension. So we're going to color that in as well. It's kind of shaped like a tuning fork. You know what that means. Okay, so we're going to color that in so it's highly visible. Same thing here, and these are kind of fine markings, and so they're not so easy to see sometimes, and especially with this dark material that's in the background and 1,000 lines going everywhere, it can get really tricky. So we're just going to keep on trying to find that green mark. There it is. Okay, so you gotta, and you've probably heard me say this before, but you gotta rotate that pencil when you're doing some coloring so you keep that sharp point on it, and you can always see where your fine line is at. Okay, see, that's much easier now than just trying to find that in all of these messed up lines that was down there for those sway bars and such. Now, we've got this set up, and so we also had a problem. You know, I've been doing this kind of stuff my whole life, so I really didn't run into these problems, but the students identified them to me. And one of them, was there's too many black lines, Mr. Mathis, and so we solved that by coloring these in. And so, and the other one was, well, now there's all of these grid lines, and they're black, just like the other black lines of the drawing. And I said, you're right. And so we came up with a solution for that, too, and that's where the red colored pencil comes in. And we simply are going to go over top of these grid lines carefully. And so you'll notice in our last project we did some serious outlining as well. We're going to do the same thing here. So I'm just going to strike right over top of that with a red colored pencil. And accuracy is pretty important here, so you've got to hold that ruler down firmly, because if you skid this all over the place, it's going to make a mess of it. And then you will maybe have to go get more printer ink or something. So if you're doing this on an actual printed image, then you probably stand a great chance of success. But you got to really conserve the paper and stuff, because it might be hard to find ink and printer paper pretty soon. Okay, so here we go. We're just continuing to do this. Now, by the way, I guess you need to, when you print this, it comes out on an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. You're going to have to draw probably a rectangle around this piece of artwork. Okay, and I'll do that next, so that you can accurately see where the drawing begins and ends. That's sometimes a problem. I've got this on a gray background, and because of that it shows up really pretty clearly, but on a white background it might not show up that clearly. So I guess if I had to advise you to do anything, you need to cut your picture down, or at least outline it so that it is what appears to, let's use centimeters, okay? Maybe it'll work out even on the centimeter scale. Well, if I can get my ruler turned around here. So it would be, it looks about like 19.5 centimeters. We'll just see, that's not any good anyway. We'll just use the inch scale then. Okay, it says it's about 7.5 inches. Okay, so I would cut it out at probably, if it's supposed to be 1 inch, so that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches wide. So I would outline it or cut it out at 8 inches wide. and then by its height would be, it looks like about 5 inches tall. So if you're going to use a pair of scissors, I would do that. I would cut it out 8 inches wide by 5 inches tall. If you're going to leave it on the paper, you'll just have to outline around the grid lines carefully so that you have an outline and you can see it clearly. Alright, so we did these vertically. We're going to do the same thing horizontally. I'm going to turn my artwork this way, and I'm going to, with firm pressure and a solid grip on the ruler, continue my line making. Now all of this setup work seems to take a while, and that's true, but that is how you get good projects, is by taking extra time to get it started properly. If you get it started all down the wrong path to begin with, well then that's very frustrating to people, and young students that I've worked with get easily frustrated when things don't work out the way they had imagined they would work out. But if you don't do the proper preparation work, it's a sure bet you're not going to make it work out. So that's you got to do the proper work. Now here we are on the last grid line, and I'm hoping I can get it good. There we go. I feel pretty confident. I'm going to start down here and right on the grid line, not on that shadow that we X'd out earlier. That's what everybody tries to do, is draw it right on that shadow instead of on that grid line. And so that's one of the problem situations with this piece of artwork. Alright, you should have something similar to this. So we've got all of our grid lines gone over in red, so now we can clearly see numerous things, and that helps when we are trying to draw. So we can see where the stripage goes around the door, we can see the sway bars down here, the black lines that represent the car, that's what we're going to draw, and the red lines that we're seeing here is like we're looking through a red fence at this car that's on a playground or something, or in a lot. So that's what we're going to use, and then we're going to navigate through this drawing by looking at the squares and figuring out what's in each square. And so I will help you with that. So that's how the picture is set up. Now we're going to put the picture, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea, especially when you're in the physical classroom, to put your name down here. When you do that, if you lose this piece of artwork or this reference, I can give it back to you. If you don't, you're going to have to figure out how to get along without it in the physical classroom. Alright, so I'm moving all this stuff off to the side because I have a piece of paper now that I've already prepared for this purpose, and we're going to begin laying that piece of paper out as well so that we can start our project. Okay, so I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to have to zoom out, I guess. Okay, so now we're going to set up our paper so that we can have the same number of squares and the same information that is on here displayed on our drawing. Okay, and so I have already, as I told you earlier, we're going to be using a 10 by 16 inch piece of paper, and so I'm just going to write that right here in the upper corner for right now, but it's 10 by 16, meaning 10 tall and 16 wide. Okay, so now all we've got to do is measure this off by 2s. We're simply going to take, these are 1-inch squares, we're going to measure this off into 2-inch squares here. And so I like to stand up when I do this simply so I can see exactly what I'm doing. So if you have an 18-inch ruler or even a 16-inch ruler, it will be much easier to do this. If you're using simply a smaller ruler such as this, well then I will show you how to do that as well, so that we can put all this together. But it really helps to have a long ruler that's about 18 inches long. Now, having said that, I'm going to move this aside because I know that most of you only have 12-inch rulers available to you. So our 10 by 16 inch piece of paper, you need to probably cut it down if you don't have one available that's maybe larger, a piece of poster board. It can't be shiny though. So we're going to measure 2, 4, and then again at 6, and then again at 8, and I only have a 10-inch ruler right here, and then again at 10. And then we're going to just continue to move our ruler over, measuring off by 2s again. So then we'll go to 2 one more time, make a nice dot there, and then also at 4 there's going to be a dot up here. Now we're going to do that same series of markings down here. So we're going to start at the edge and we're going to mark it at 2, 4, 6, 8, don't let it skid, and 10. Accuracy is important. And then we're going to move on over here and we're going to do the same thing again, measuring off by 2s at 2 and 4. Now even if you only had a 10-inch ruler like I'm using, you could do this part right here. So we're going to find our dots, accurately measured out, line them up carefully, hold the ruler down so it's firmly pushed against the paper and will not skid. I'm drawing these lines rather darkly. You should draw yours much lighter than this. These have to show up on a projection screen, so I'm pushing down pretty firmly on the pencil. But you should draw lightly so that you can clearly see where you can erase easily is what I'm trying to get at. You can see the boxes clearly, but also they are erased easily at the end of the project. Okay, we're going to just continue this, just, you know, carefully going from dot to dot because we took the time to measure accurately. And it seems sometimes like the setup work takes a while, and that is true. However, when you take the extra time to do your setup work properly, the probability that you're going to mess up is much lower. So any time that you use in planning is time that you get back in production, almost always. Now I can't, you know, art's not a guarantee of anything, right? So sometimes things happen. So we line all that off, and we should have, if we have on the little picture right here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares there. So we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so that must mean that we are doing it properly. So we're simply going to now measure down the sides, and in this case we're going to go and make a mark at 2 and at 4 and at 6 and at 8. Now we don't have to mark it at 10 because that's the bottom of the paper. Now since we're using a small ruler, we have to be able to bridge across these marks. So we're going to go to the center line there, and we're going to make a mark at 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. One more time down this side over here, make sure your measurements are accurate. Holding it down firmly and marking it 2, 4, 6, and 8 again. Now all we really have to do is connect these dots horizontally, and by doing that we should come out with a representation of the same number of squares that we have on the project sheet that we are working from, that I handled earlier in this demonstration. Okay, now, so that looks pretty good on there right now. I say let's go ahead and start connecting our dots. So we line it up accurately, so it's just, don't let the ruler skid, and it should pass right through the dots if we've done it right. Then we're just simply going to move our ruler over and continue to make the dots, or the line that passes through the dots. Now I am drawing heavy, you should draw lightly. Same again. So a lot of, you may have noticed that this is our second project where we begin it by drawing squares, and you would be right. But the ability to measure off things accurately, and then the ability to break it down into small pieces, which is what all these squares are, is really the key feature of good perceptual ability, is to be able to take complicated things that you see, or complicated problems, and an art problem is a complicated problem, and then break it down into steps which are achievable. So, you know, a lot of people want to go from having an idea to the complete expression of that idea and a resolution to it very quickly, and that almost never results in good work. So you have to take the time to accurately and carefully plan what you're doing, and then once you do that, the expressive part comes much more easily. Alright, let's see what we got here. To me, that looks like a properly set up grid system for our project. So we look at this. Now on here we are going to letter it across the top from A through H, and everything that's done on here we should do over here too. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Remember, this is a 10 by 16 inch piece of paper. And then we're going to, A and 1 are the same square, so we're going to number it down the left side. Okay, now, not too hard, is it? So what we're going to do is break this down one square at a time when we start the drawing, and we're going to draw what we see in each square. It's probably a good idea to put your name down here. I'm going to put my name down here because when they dig this up in 1,000 years, I want to know who made it. Alright, now, so if you've got all of this part done, and you've got your paper 10 by 16 laid out, this is a little bit shorter session today simply because we are doing our setup work for our project. So we're going to quickly review what you need. You need a 10 by 16 inch piece of paper like you see right here. You're going to of course need to set up your project paper that way. You're going to need a 4-inch pattern like this if you can find one, a jar lid, a 2 1/2 inch pattern like that. Okay, so I've got all these things listed right here, what we're going to need. Okay, you're definitely going to need a ruler for this project as well. You will need a compass if you can find one, but the patterns will do the job if you need them to. You will need, of course, an eraser because there will be problems that you need to fix and erase. And let's see, what else we got going on here? You're definitely going to need a pencil for this project. And it never hurts. Oh yeah, our other 2 items that we need, and that would be our red colored pencil and a green colored pencil to do the coloring portion of our car, as you see right here. Okay, I think that's everything for today, so get your materials together, and in the next session we will start making a drawing. Thanks. See you.